a pregnant widow, sold at auction, and one silent stranger who stepped up and said 3 words that changed everything. This really happened, in a version of it, in the Old West, a time when a woman with no husband and no money could be sold like property. Her name was Marianne Cole. The man who saved her was Caleb Whitfield. Stick around, because what he says to her is the whole reason this story is unforgettable. Let's go back to that platform. Marianne Cole hadn't asked for any of this. 6 months earlier, her husband had been crushed in a mine collapse, and she buried him thinking the worst was behind her. It wasn't. Turned out he'd left behind debts she never knew existed, and the town banker, a cold, calculating man named Silas Reed, decided there was an easy way to settle the books. He'd sell her. So there she stood, wrists bound, belly heavy with the child she was carrying alone, while a grimy crowd threw out bids like she was a sack of grain. $20. $30. A man missing half his teeth grinned at her like he'd already won. The auctioneer, a greasy little man named Prout, cracked jokes about getting 2 workers for the price of 1. The crowd laughed. Marianne closed her eyes and prayed, even though she'd stopped believing anyone was listening. Then a voice cut through the noise. Calm. Unhurried. Certain. $100. The whole street went quiet. A tall man stepped out from the back of the crowd, his face half hidden under his hat. But his eyes were locked on her, and there was something in them nobody in that crowd had shown her in months. Kindness. His name was Caleb Whitfield. Folks in town knew him, though nobody really knew him. He kept to himself out on his ranch in the valley, and he wasn't the type to go looking for a fight. But he wasn't the type to walk away from one either, if it landed in front of him. The auctioneer sputtered. $100 for a pregnant woman. Caleb didn't blink. Did I stutter? Nobody argued after that. Here's a detail that gets left out of most versions of stories like this, so let me add it in, because I think it matters. Buying someone's freedom and actually giving them freedom are 2 very different things. Plenty of men in that same century would have paid the $100 and then treated Marianne exactly like the crowd did, like property. What made Caleb different wasn't the money. It was what he did 3 seconds after he had her. He walked up those platform steps, pulled a small key from his coat, and unlocked her chains himself. No smugness. No claiming her like a prize. Just quiet, steady hands doing the one thing that mattered, setting her free. Then he leaned in close, so only she could hear him. You're safe now. 3 words. That's all it took to break something loose in her chest that had been locked up since the day they buried her husband. She cried the whole ride out of town, wrapped in his coat, and Caleb just let her cry, eyes forward on the road, giving her the one thing nobody else had bothered to give her in months. Space to fall apart without judgment. When she finally found her voice, she asked him the only question that made sense. Why did you do it? His answer was simple. No woman deserves what they meant to do to you. Especially not one carrying a child. She reminded him he'd just spent $100 on a stranger. He shrugged it off. Money's just money. That's when you start to understand this isn't really a story about a rescue. It's a story about a man who'd already lost someone he loved once, and swore, even if he never said it out loud, that he wouldn't stand by and watch it happen again. His ranch sat tucked in a quiet valley. pine trees. A running creek, smoke curling up from the chimney. Nothing fancy, but it felt like the safest place Marianne had been in half a year. A big, clumsy dog named Scout came barreling out to greet the wagon, all noise and no bite, and even that small, silly moment made her laugh for the first time in what felt like forever. Inside, the house told her everything about the man who built it. Tidy. Warm. A stone fireplace, a shelf of well-worn books. Not a man who lived in chaos. A man who lived with intention. He got the fire going, brought her stew and warm bread, and when she asked if there was anything she could do to help, he just said, "Rest." Over the days that followed, something unexpected happened. A rhythm formed between two people who had every reason to stay strangers. Marianne cooked, mended his shirts, swept the floors, even when he tried to stop her from doing too much. Caleb worked the cattle from sunup and came home every evening, tired but calm, never once complaining, always making time to sit with her by the fire while Scout slept at their feet. One evening on the porch, scent their troublesome. Watching the sky turn the color of a bruised peach behind the mountains, Marianne finally asked the question that had been sitting in the back of her mind for weeks. Why had he really come to that auction? He didn't seem like a man who mixed with crowds. Caleb went quiet for a moment, staring at the fading light. Then he told her about his sister Anna. She'd married a cruel man, tried more than once to leave him, and nobody stepped in to help her. She didn't survive it. "I couldn't save her," he said, his voice rougher than she'd ever heard it. "But I could save you." Marianne didn't say anything right away. She just reached over and put her hand on his arm, the first time she'd touched him without him touching her first. Some things don't need words. Caleb looked down at her hand, like he wasn't quite sure what to do with the fact that someone was choosing to stay close to him instead of needing something from him. For a man who'd spent years alone in that valley, it was a small thing that felt enormous. From that night on, something between them shifted. It wasn't sudden, and it wasn't loud. It was the kind of change you only notice looking back. The way he started leaving his hat by the door, instead of on his head when he walked in. The way she started saving him the last of the coffee without being asked. Small things. The kind that build a life. A week later, a wagon rolled up the drive at sundown, and for a second, old fear flickered back into Marianne's eyes. Caleb's hand went straight to his revolver, telling her to stay inside. But it was only Dr. Langley and his sharp-tongued, warm-hearted wife, Colleen, who marched straight up and pulled Marianne into a hug before anyone said a word. "We've all been worried sick about you," Colleen said, brushing Marianne's hair, back like she'd known her for years. The doctor checked on the baby, smiled, and told her everything was exactly as it should be. Later, while Marianne rested, Colleen pulled Caleb aside on the porch and said the thing he hadn't dared say out loud himself. "You love her. Don't bother denying it. You're a terrible liar." He didn't deny it. He just didn't have an answer ready either. Weeks turned to months. Marianne grew stronger. Her belly grew rounder. And Caleb grew more and more certain of something he'd been trying very hard to ignore. Then, one ordinary morning, while she was peeling potatoes, a sharp pain cut across her back. Another one followed, stronger. Caleb walked in just as she gripped the counter, and in an instant the calm, steady rancher she'd come to know looked genuinely rattled for the first time. "The baby's coming," she told him. He got her to bed, gathered blankets and water with fast, careful hands, and then made her a promise before riding off into the dark. "I'll bring them back." Alone in that room, Marianne did the only thing she could. She talked to the baby, out loud, through every wave of pain. "We can do this together," she whispered, over and over. Like a prayer she was finally sure someone was hearing. Hours later, hoofbeats thundered back up the drive. Colleen burst through the door first, sleeves already rolled up, telling her they'd made it. The doctor followed, calm as ever. Colleen told her, almost laughing through the tension, that Caleb had ridden like the devil himself was chasing him and was now wearing a groove into the porch outside. "Of course he did," Colleen said. "That man would walk through fire for you." Not long after, a sharp cry filled the little room. A boy, small, red-faced, fists already balled up, like he was ready to take on the whole world. Marianne held him and whispered the words every mother probably whispers first. "I've been waiting for you." When Colleen asked what she'd name him, Marianne didn't hesitate. Elias Caleb Cole. Colleen's eyebrows lifted at the middle name, but she just smiled and said nothing. When Caleb finally came in, hat in his hands, like he didn't know what to do with them, his eyes found Marianne first, worried and hopeful all at once. She told him they were both fine, then lifted the baby just slightly. "Caleb, meet Elias Caleb." He froze. "You gave him my name? You saved us," she said softly. "I wanted him to carry a piece of the man who gave us a future." He held that baby, like he was afraid of breaking something far more fragile than a newborn. When the tiny hand wrapped around his finger, something shifted behind his eyes. The same steady man who'd once said, "Did I stutter?" to a crowd of strangers, now looked completely undone by one small grip. The weeks after the birth blurred into something soft and good. Colleen stayed to help. Caleb barely left the house, always finding some reason to be close: fresh water, a warm meal, a quiet seat beside Marianne when she was tired. Then, in early October, with the leaves turning gold outside the window, Marianne finally asked the question that had been sitting between them for months. "Winter's coming. What happens to us then?" Caleb looked down at the baby sleeping in his arms, then lifted his eyes to hers. "You don't have to leave," he said. "You can stay here as long as you want. I can't imagine this house without you. Or him. I want you both here, not out of charity, not out of duty. Because I want a life with you." He paused, searching her face for the courage to finish the thought. "I love you, Marianne." She asked if that was a proposal. He told her gently not yet, not until she was ready. But he wanted her to know exactly where he stood. "I love you too," she said. And that's it. That's the whole story. A woman standing on an auction block with nothing left to lose. And a quiet stranger who decided her life was worth more than the $100 in his pocket. Here's what I keep coming back to every time I think about stories like this one. The world is full of moments where it would be so easy to look away. To tell yourself it's not your problem, that someone else will step in. Caleb Whitfield didn't do that. And it didn't just change Marianne's life. It changed his too. So here's my question for you before you go. If you were standing in that crowd that day, would you have been the one to speak up? Or would you have stayed quiet, like everybody else? Let me know in the comments. And if this story got you, stick around, because there are more just like it coming.